It's interesting that I'm following Phil. He designed our state of Wisconsin tartan, and I would like to say our state tartan is the exception that proves the rule, where you have to have something to support your colors. So I'm just going to go through the design part of it, and then the legislative side of it, Dave Berger is going to cover that. I have approximately 7 minutes to get through this. To me, getting the state tartan was a matter of persuading a state that has less than 2% of the population have the Scottish blood. And in that less than 2% are a number of Ulster Scots who are notoriously cantankerous. And our St. Andrew Society at that time was particularly cantankerous. And it got to the point where the old saying is you could put a Scot in a closet all by himself, and he's going to come out in 5 minutes later with a black eye. And that's pretty much where our whole Wisconsin thing came about. And the legislature, of course, is even less representative in terms of the Scottish thing. So when I was putting this thing together, I thought, well, we've got 2 things that we have to worry about. One is the blatant ethnic thing, which of course everybody would be upset about, and particularly our press has that way of doing things. And the other thing is to try to figure out to get the broadest appeal. And so I thought, well, okay, let's get on to this thing. So I started, did it just absolutely wrong, I guess, and listening to, if I had listened to Phil a long time ago, he'd been much further along. So I wanted to have a tartan that commemorated the Scots' contribution to Wisconsin, but I also wanted to have something with a very broad appeal, something that possibly would be of interest to the non-Scots. So I started something as non-controversial as possible. I started looking at the Wisconsin governors who, surprisingly, there are a number of Scottish names in our list of Wisconsin governors, but there's only one Scot that was a governor that came from Scotland. There were 2 others that in their biographies or some other source had claimed to Scottishness. The rest of them with Scottish-sounding names could be Scots, but there was nothing in their official biographies talking about their ancestry. They could have been Irish, they could have been Ulster Irish, or Ulster Scots, they could have been across the border Englishmen. So the next thing I went to is, okay, let's move to some famous families. The other thing I forgot to mention was that the governor's tartans that we did have that we could look up, they were all hunting tartans. So then I looked up the famous families in Wisconsin, and we had a number of them. General MacArthur's family and General Mitchell's family, and Roy Chapman Andrews, who at one time was a very famous archaeologist, and John Muir, who brought up in Wisconsin. And we had so those guys are all hunting tartans, so it's still, I said, well, this isn't going to grab anybody. It's still pretty narrow interest. So then I got into looking at a number of tartans that were talking about the blue skies of this state and the browns of the mountains and all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, what about representative color representing the industries that made Wisconsin the great state it was? And if you could do that, you could put it on a historical basis, and that's what we did. I don't know if you could give me a Wisconsin, oh, here we go, okay. I don't know if you can see the brown, it's a little light, but the brown represents the French fur trade, and the gray stripe represents the Welsh miners, the lead mining. So we had the fur trade, and we had the lead mines, and then we had the green, which represented our great pinery. We had a huge lumber industry and a forest. Then we have the 2 Great Lakes, Superior and Lake Michigan, and plus a marvelous merchant maritime trade. And then we have the yellow for, I'll start with the dairy industry, but I thought, okay, I can finesse a little bit in here, and we can talk about the brewery industry also being in the yellow with our pale ales and so on, and that covered Schlitz, Blatz, Pabst, and Miller's. And I thought I'd get some response out of that. And then the next was finally was the red line, the University of Wisconsin. And I said, well, what's that all about? Well, it's consistently, over the years, whether in depressions or otherwise, it's been the second largest employer in the state. And it's also been the main technical thrust of all the industries that I talked about. They've all gotten input from the University of Wisconsin in terms of value added to their product, new ways of doing things, and so on. So I felt it had a legitimate place. So I took these colors and I called up Phil and I said, Phil, how much is this going to cost? And he said, well, he fortunately gave me a very modest fee, so he was commissioned to come up with a tartan complex. Well, he sent me 13 computer printouts. I think it was 13, it might have been 15. And then he said, well, now, Bob, you should really have a woman look at this if you finally get to something that you want. Well, I disregarded that, of course. And I took the 3 that I thought would get people charged up. And then we went, and I got 4 or 5 of my buddies from the St. Andrews Society, and we went down to a bar, and we wrestled around with these. And after, I think, the 6th or 7th pitcher of beer, we came to the conclusion that this was it. But in the course of that, one of the guys said, wait a minute, we've got a 6th industry involved here, and that's the professional sports. What are you talking about? Look where the green and the yellow come together. That's the Green Bay Packers. Well, I'll tell you, that was another additional couple pitchers of beer just in celebration of that. And we do have professional sports. We have the Bucks, and we have the Brewers, and we have the Admirals, and of course the Packers. And so that, anyway, got us off to a good start. And I sent them all to sorry, I'm drawing a mental blank here. So I sent them back to him and said, here's what we want. And he immediately sent them to the color representatives, and he felt the same way about it. He didn't feel too comfortable. And he said, well, at least you kept it to a minimum of 5. And that was very good. So we got the colors together, and I sent them to Smith, and then he turned them over to Dalglish, and we got him weaving the tartan. And, what came back was very well received. In fact, that original swatch is hanging up in the Irish Cultural Center, and depending which faction of the Irish are in there, it's either sitting in the main room in the or it's up in the attic, and it seems to move up and down depending on which group is running the Irish Cultural Center. So the next thing was to make a booklet about this, and the end result is trying to persuade a group of ornery, cantankerous legislators who are out of touch with everybody. So a friend of ours, a friend of St. Andrews Society, by the name of Ken Cook, was publishing something. I said, here's what I want to put in this thing, how much would it cost to do it? He said, I'll do it for nothing. So we published about 1,000 of these things, and I couldn't find the box of books. I just moved. I was going to bring them along as a handout, but in any event, the booklet continued. What I got in there was the suggested language, a page in the suggested language of the bill, a copy of the enrolled joint state resolution that they had come up with, a resolution, not any statutes, I think, in 1998. The U.S. Senate resolution, House resolution, the President's letter, the state, county, and city proclamations that we received for tartan and so on, and photos of the governor's tartan, the mayor's, these major families, and their family tartans. And then another interesting was the tartan from the University of Wisconsin in Scotland, which was a registered tartan. And we had a coalition of 5 of our state universities rented Dalkeith Palace, and they have 60 students a semester come through there. We've got over 3,000 alumni that have gone through Dalkeith Palace, and of course this is the Crew Estates. Then I had the Canadian provincial tartans, which, by the way, they do have a final state or a Canadian tartan, I've been told, and they have approved April 6th as the official tartan day. Then I had the Irish tartans, and that kind of shook everybody up. And photos of all the state tartans, and I forgot where I got those, but I had all of the tartans. I had this all in this booklet. And then a section on U.S. tartans that were available at that time. And then last 2 pages were suggested use: caps, scarves, ties, vests, shirts, upholstery, shirts, tablecloths, and bunting and flags and banners. Then I had to get to a mailing list to get this out to help persuade the legislators. So it's really what it was clans, bands, and Celtic societies, in the course of which I found out we had 28 curling clubs with over 3,000 members in Wisconsin. I thought that would be a real winner, but it didn't pan out the way it would have. So, in any event, we got up to the president. We got all the stuff mailed out and so on. And then the next thing was getting it in front of our state legislature. And for that, I will turn over to my esteemed colleague, the former state senator of Wisconsin and our current president of St. Andrews. Thank you.
I'm wearing 2 official state symbols today, the Wisconsin tartan and the badger, which, fortunately, none of you are PETA people, I hope, that are in the audience. Greetings from Wisconsin. A lot of you have probably seen some of our politics lately on television, so it's more like being under the reign of Belial rather than of Bruce, so it's not as much fun over there now. But that's the only joke I had. I think my responsibility, essentially, because I'd been a member of the legislature, was to kind of help organize the legislative process to actually make this happen. We did have to determine first that we needed to do it by a bill, by legislation rather than resolution, because our Constitution essentially wouldn't allow a resolution of the legislature to officially recognize anything. They're more like congratulatory telegrams rather than having any force and effect and legal authority, because other state symbols are delineated in the statutes. So thanks to Phil, we got the thread count, and we had the Legislative Reference Bureau actually draft a bill which has the full thread count in the legislation, not the descriptions that Bob described, but actually the thread count, so it would be understood into the future what it would be like. Secondly is finding a sponsor. The one thing that there was a comment about the people who are fearful of putting in a resolution or a bill in Pennsylvania. That's what I call legislative speak. And legislative speak is the people who, today's legislators, God love them all or not, are people who I think they've got such a self-inflated belief that they're very important that they forget that they can multitask. And part of my job was to spend a lot of time with them saying, you actually can multitask. When I was there, I voted to put the dairy cow in the blue book, and I also worked on probate reform. You can do it. Believe me, it's possible. You know, that the mind actually can embrace some of those things. The secret, though, to getting your state tartan is this is the booklet, by the way, that Ken Cook did for us for free. And it really helped us with what you call in the lobbying business, this is the leave behind. So that we would visit a legislator in their office, even if you just talk to the staff, the leave behind gives the impression that this is really a group of people who really are sincere about this. And it might seem simplistic, but it really is an important little tool to make certain that they have it. Because obviously you can't just go leaving kilts and swatches all over the Capitol, but this is a good way to do it. You have to then sit down with legislators and nag them. You have to be able to be willing to not take back that legislative speak, but to say to them, you can multitask and we want you to do this. We have to help you. You have to understand that there are constituents that want this. Then you get the guys who will come back and say, yeah, but if we do something for the Scots, what about the Germans? And, you know, then you say to them, oh, you've already got bratwurst beer and, you know, sausage races at the ballpark. It's okay. You can move on and do something else. But we also recrafted the brochure to be called the Celtic gift to the state rather than just a Scottish gift, because tartan is part of the lives of other Celtic cultures, so that it had a more universal appeal and a bit more of a universal taste. So we had the opportunity to get the legislation, we had the leave behind, and I guess I'll take a little bit of credit by having the time in retirement to be able to go up to Madison and nag legislators. But I also organized, and Bob helped in organizing these groups, not so much the curlers, but other groups, including our own St. Andrews members, who were now able to, thanks to email, easily contact their legislators and say, we like this bill, we really want this thing to move and do something about it. So the nagging paid off, and we were in a great position of being able to finally get the bill. We had a committee hearing, got the bill out of committee. It sat on, in the first year, the Speaker of the Assembly wasn't too thrilled about the thing. He was generally pretty rude to us about the whole process and wouldn't bring the bill up for a floor vote. He ran for Congress that year, and I can probably account for about 4,000 of the 8,000 votes he lost by in terms of curlers and others who we kept contacting and saying, it wasn't that he wouldn't give us a vote, it's but he treated us like dirt. But you want to make sure people understand that you have feelings and that you do care about this, and it does matter. And it matters to become a state symbol. The next session, we had a similar, they gave us a bit of a runaround in the lower house and gave us a vote finally on the last week of, the second to last week of session, expecting that it would go to the Senate, but there wouldn't necessarily be enough time. They're playing a little game kind of thing. But what they hadn't counted on was the fact that, having been a senator, I had friends over there, a few. And they actually took the bill up and moved it through in 72 hours, and it was the last bill passed by the legislature that session. And we would have gotten it signed on Tartan Day, except that fell on a Sunday in 08, and Governor Doyle didn't want to violate the Sabbath by signing the bill or something. But the process is very simple. If you want this to happen in your state, you get an agreement like with the group, like the St. Andrews Society or others that say, yes, this is the direction we want to go. Get yourself organized in terms of people who actually contact legislators. Most people don't realize that, well, a lot of legislators are tuned in. If they even only have one letter in the file from one constituent, it's more than none. And I'll tell you something, that one letter can tip them into voting for something, because it really it's not a takeaway from anything they're trying to do in public policy. And they can then be kind of proud that they value added in terms of something that has that kind of cachet for the state that is important, that is significant, and that is recognizable. So very simply, lobby, contact, just do it the good old-fashioned way, and it works. So thank you.